All right, this time we're going to do the redraft strategies. This is more about the strategies and less about the players. The idea here is that how do we address certain positions we're drafting from? How do we structure our lineup as we're building? I'm sure we all have different ideas of that. We'll just stay with standard 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, flex, tight end type thing. But we might get into some super flex stuff, and we'll definitely open it up to the audience soon. So they can ask questions because this is more about you and less about us. So I'm going to start just to introduce myself. I'm Bob Lung. I put on this lovely thing we call the Expo, so thank you all for being here. Thank you. I also write this book called the Fantasy Football Consistency Guide in its 10th year. So if you haven't gotten it, there is some for sale out front, so shameless plug for that. If you run out of copies out front, you can get it on Amazon in 2 days if you're a Prime member, so check that out. So I'm going to pass it down to these guys to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started with our first questions.
My name is Joe Bartle. I've been at RotoWire for the past 10 years now. I host the SiriusXM show on Fridays for RotoWire Fantasy Football, and on Sunday as well, too, Angel Fire Radio. And strategy for redraft in particular is probably my biggest nerdiest thing that I do. I love talking about. We do the RotoWire Fantasy Football podcast all throughout the year, which is literally just me geeking out about that too. So whether it be best ball or dynasty, just the strategy of drafting itself is probably my favorite thing.
My name's Casey Kasem. Yes, that was loud, sorry. My name is Casey Kasem. I write for numerous sites, Roto Baller, I write for Fantasy Six Pack, and I write for Optimist Fantasy. And I also have a t-shirt company for fantasy football shirts called Sunday Dreamers Club. And my podcast is called Get Real with Casey Kasem, and I talk to analysts, people in the fantasy space about how they got started and why, and what we can learn from those guys and gals.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ricky Rodrigue with IDP Plus. The plus means we do more than just IDP, and for those that aren't familiar with that, it's individual defensive players. So if y'all have some of those types of questions, we can take those as well, although I know there's probably a lot of offense in the crowd. I do a show called IDP Plus Advice that you can find on the IDP Plus YouTube channel.
Hi, everybody. I'm Grindberg. I represent the Fantasy Sports Advice Network. We are the main sponsor here at the Expo this year, and we were last year as well. I direct content for the site. So you can find my podcast, my show, The Fantasy Forecast, on the network. It is a redraft show, but I also have the Dynasty Pulse as well, which is a dynasty show. So we run content all year round. So come check us out, booth number 1, if you want some more information about it.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. My name's Raphael, Real Talk Raf, some of you may know me by, co-founder of rotoballer.com, and you can hear me on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio, usually weekday mornings this time of year, 6 to 7 a.m. Eastern. We have a booth there. Go say hi to the guys. You've probably seen some of our team around, but all sports all the time, but football season, it's all football. So we're here to talk sports and get involved. Thank you guys for listening. Appreciate it.
Name's Doug Orth. I've been with FF Today for 18 going on 19 years. I just accepted a position, a full-time fantasy position with the Huddle, so I'll be in charge of a lot of their content. And you can also catch me on Die Hards. It's a YouTube podcast that I co-host with JJ Winter.
All right, so as you see, we have some very smart people up here that have done fantasy football for a long time. If we added all the years together, I'm sure it would be pretty close to 200, because I make up like a fifth of it, because I've been doing it for 40. All right, so Raph, we're going to start with you at the opposite end there. Let's talk about just the position in the first round. Do you have a favorite spot? Does it matter to you where you draft? Talk about that, because a lot of people think, well, if I have the first pick, I'm in the best shape. Maybe, maybe not. Talk about that, and each one of us will kind of come down this way to bring up our favorite spot if we have one, and how do we address that when we know where we're picking early, mid, or late. Raph, I'll start with you, bud.
Thanks, Bob. We all would love to have the ideal pick in our minds that we want, but of course we're not all bribing league commissioners and making that happen, so you have to be a little flexible. In 10 or 12 team formats, my preference is to always have either really the last pick in the round or maybe somewhere in the early middle. I don't really like that dead zone of 8 or 9, but I could tell you right now that most of the time I'm looking at a wide receiver in the first round, especially in point per reception leagues. The nature of the beast is just that you stack up on receivers, you have more options in the flex, and that's where the primary scoring comes from, in my opinion, throughout the year in consistency. Bob knows a lot about fantasy football consistency, so that matters, and you get a lot of it in the first round. Probably not going to lose your league in the first round with a bad pick unless they get injured, but it's still important to have a preference. So my preference is I like double tapping at the very end, 12th or 10th pick.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. I think especially this year, that's our sweet spots in the drafts, especially in the 3 wide receiver range where you have to start 3. I think starting at the end, picks 11 or 12 are kind of the sweet spot there. Running back, I like that in that range, and then tapping a wide receiver right after, I think is a really strong strategy this year. And that's the strongest spot where I've been able to mock draft from and find, the best team out of it. So if I can get that option, I'd be doing that this year for sure.
Wow, we're unanimous so far. I like being on the tail end as well. But part of the reason this year I am a believer in stats, and I'm a believer in the curse of 370 and all these running backs that had so many touches last year. So Bijan Robinson had around 360. Saquon had over 400. Jacobs had over 320. And so I really think, some of those running backs that are going really early, I have a bad feeling they're going to get hurt this year. And I'd rather let somebody else have them and draft other people at the later part of the round and come around the second round. And I think that's a recipe for success this year.
When I draft, part of it is a superstition thing where I'm like, I got to be 6 or 7. But also 6 or 7 it's a range where I feel comfortable. Like the first couple of players that are taken off the board, you know who they're going to be. So when it gets to me, I'm like, okay, am I going to go wide receiver or am I going to go running back? And honestly, I do have both of those strategies in my head when I go into it. I like to go wide receiver early, but yesterday, like in the Queen's Classic, I took Derrick Henry with the 6th pick, and I actually did 2 running backs in a row, and I'm like, okay, this is how we're going to pivot. This is what we're going to roll. You kind of have to go with how the draft comes to you, but 6 or 7, I think, feels pretty safe.
I'm nervous because I think I'll go counter to what the rest of the table is, which has a lot of really smart people here. My favorite pick is absolutely number 4 and possibly number 5 as well, too. I've put a lot of thought into this, more or less. I think the reason that everyone's saying late first round is a good spot to be is because I would argue this year there's probably 16 first-round picks, whereas there's been times in past years where there's a tier drop at 4 or 8 or 9. Nobody would be upset if you said, I like A.J. Brown over Brian Thomas. There'd be maybe a bit of an eyebrow, but nobody's going to bat an eye about that for the most part. If you liked, let's just say, Drake London, like I do, over Brian Thomas, nobody gets upset about that. That's talking about pick 4 or 5 into the second round. What I keep thinking about is I want that first tier of receiver, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, and more importantly, I want that next tier of running back coming back. Josh Jacobs, Bucky Irving, Jonathan Taylor. If Derrick Henry is falling to me in a stupid league, not yours, that was smart with Derrick Henry. If Derrick Henry falls back to me in the second round, that's the preferred spot because I would rather have those running backs over the Lab McConkey, Marvin Harrison, Garrett Wilson range of receivers. So if I get that top end of receiver at pick 4 or 5 and then get one of those running backs that come back in the turn, that's my best case scenario. And I've found 4 or 5, especially post Jefferson hamstring injury, that's my preferred spot and one I'll pick every time.
I think the seating arrangements were chosen really well. I know they were random, but they were chosen really well because I'm almost word for word in agreement with him here. I would go the 4 to 6 range. I used to be a running back almost no matter what kind of guy. Within the last 2 years, I will say I shifted. I still love my running backs. However, especially with this year, he said about 16 first-round picks. I say I feel comfortable with probably the first 20 picks. And I don't mean first rounders, but as far as like, let's say 14 first round grades and about another 6 early second round grades, that kind of thing. So I love to build my teams now, especially 3. And the setup is important. If you're playing 2 receiver leagues, not as important, but when you're in a 3 receiver league, that's telling you that you need to target receiver. And it's great to have the CeeDee Lamb, the Justin Jefferson, if you're picking 4 to 6 range. and then be able to come back, and you have less reliance on the running back position because you have less invested in him. And so having that wide receiver anchor and then being able to build from that, I think, is critical. At least it was critical to my success the last 2 years.
All right. All right. So, yeah, you got to turn me up. I'm starting to lose my voice. So my attitude, and this is going to sound really bad, is that I don't care where I'm drafting from because I'm going to be successful regardless. Except when Doug's in my league, and then usually he kicks my ass, which is what he did last year in the Kings Classic. But we won't talk about we won't talk about that. But no, I mean, whether it's getting Chase, Jefferson, Bijan, whatever in the first 5 picks, or getting the double tap at the end, you're walking away with 2 top players. 24 may be just as good because we don't know, right? Last year, how many people passed on Derrick Henry in mid-second round because he's done, he's washed up, he's old. It happened. If you drafted him in the late first or mid-second, guess what? You probably had CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, one of those guys, and you probably did well. You at least made the playoffs. You probably maybe won your title. So to me, it's like it doesn't matter. I mean, you're going to get the best players. You know what you want. You know what your data is telling you. You know, you rely on a lot of these people who are sitting up here to help you. And whether it's the consistency model or Raph or Doug or any of these people, they've got a knowledge base that can help you make that decision. And that's the important part. Do not listen to any of us for everything and make that decision based on that. Take different people's information, take different people's different sites, different concepts, and then you make the best pick. You're going to feel better about it. If it fails, it fails, but it's your pick, not our pick. And that's what I can't stress that enough. So I think any position is good. Pick the best players, use the knowledge from all of these people that are in this place, and I think you'll be very successful at what you're doing. So let's move on to the next question, and we'll go back that way. And so the question is, do you guys have a strategy? There's many types, right? We got bowling, we got hero RBs, we got stacks, we got all this stuff. Do you have one that you hold on to? I mean, obviously mine's consistency, let's be honest. But do you guys have a strategy that you feel like works best for you or works best for the leagues you're in? Because an expert league with Doug and I and folks versus a home league that you're in, it's a different group of people. But you know those people. We know these people. So it helps going in when you know the people around you, which is great. But sometimes people just have that strategy that they hold on to. So, Doug, I'm going to let you start. What's a strategy that, based on either the league or the scoring or whatever the case may be, that you go into a draft with a certain idea of how your team's going to be built?
So we're talking something like bully tight end or okay.
Yep.
So yeah, I really push back against this as far as no.
Or do you hate it?
As long as you don't go into a draft with, I'm going to do this, because part of being a good drafter and coming right with good drafts time after time is recognizing what's coming to you. One of the things that's said, I'm going to go a little bit off track here, but one of the things that's said about a snake draft is that you get the players that the league allows you to have. In an auction draft, you get to choose the players you want on your team, type of thing. So let the value come to you in a snake draft. If that means 3 receivers, if that means, let's say you have for whatever reason, you have Marvin Harrison Jr. as the top 15 receiver, and he's there for you in the 3rd round. You got three top 15 receivers. That's a great way to build. You can figure things out from there. If you're right about that, if you're right about him being a top 15 receiver, and you're right about your first two receivers as well, you've got an advantage over your league that no one else is going to come away with 3 top 15 receivers. So as long as you don't go into a draft with a preset notion, let the value come to you. However, do I have a preference? I like to come away the first couple rounds with a running back and a receiver because it keeps me flexible, and the longer you can remain flexible in a draft, the better. Just because if you go If you go 3 running backs in the first round, that probably takes you out of running back in the 4th round, regardless of who made it there. So keep yourself flexible as long as possible.
Keep yourself flexible as long as possible is something no one would ever say about me. And if Bob's allowed a cop-out answer with the what position you want to have in the draft, I'll answer it the same way. I think entering the idea saying you have to do something is wrong. I want to be flexible, even though I'm not in real life. I want to be flexible from a draft strategy and putting yourself in a position, whether it be 2 running backs right away, 3 receivers right away. I need to go 0 RB. I need to go hero RB. I would love, from an egotistical perspective, to have a draft strategy named after me. But if I am just Joe, which I am for every one of my team names, I will be just Joe when I'm doing the draft strategy, which is flexibility all throughout. Doug did a perfect job explaining why you want to do it. Don't ever put yourself in a position where you have to chase a position. Just make sure you're drafting flexibility to what the draft is giving you.
So I'm just basically going to echo a lot of what they said, but yeah, when I go into it, I look at it like, yeah, I do want to get either a running back or a wide receiver in that first round. Like I said, I like to draft 6th or 7th, so I kind of let it come to me, and then I decide, is the running back a better value or is the wide receiver? Because I also am one of those people that likes to find value in the later rounds on wide receivers that I know are going to have maybe not a season of consistency, but I know that they're the boom or bust kind of guys that if I need that help in bye weeks or whatever, I'm okay with not getting a wide receiver, in the first 2 rounds or so. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, be flexible. Some of my my draft yesterday was kind of off the rails because one person takes a quarterback in the 3rd round. And then everybody starts taking a quarterback in the 3rd round. And guess what I did too? Hey, Joe Burrow, how are you doing?
So I don't prescribe to hero running back, 0 running back, any of the above. I mean, Doug said it well at the beginning. You got to let the value come to you and let that drive your draft from there. I mean, that's just the way to do it. One of the things I like to do is I build my own draft board. I mentioned that I like numbers and stats earlier. The repeat rate of positions year over year is much lower than you would think. So quarterbacks is the most common one with tight ends, but running backs, usually only 5 of the top 12 repeat year over year in the top 12. And it's 11 of the top 24, if I'm remembering correctly, at the top of my head. So listening to all the experts like Bob was talking about earlier, I'd take different takes and so forth, and I say, okay, who do I believe is going to pop in? Who's going to believe is going to pop out? And I build my draft board around that. That gives me the flexibility that these folks were talking about in terms of how to approach things and all. And so that's why I don't go in with a hero or 0. I go with the talent based on what I think, using stats and numbers from the past.
Yeah, and these guys have done a really excellent job breaking this down as far as being flexible in your drafts. Never go in with a strategy of this is what I need to be doing. And one of the biggest pieces of advice I have for someone, coming in new is knowing your league strategy, like your scoring, because that's a huge thing that a lot of people overlook is, especially like when we're talking about 3 wide receivers we're starting as opposed to 2 running backs. So that's going to make those wide receivers a little bit more lucrative, and I'm going to be looking at targeting one of those main guys at this point for sure, coming out of the first 2 rounds with somebody I think is going to be a top 5 wide receiver to be an alpha in my lineup. So scoring is huge. I see a lot of beginners coming in and not understanding how their formats are laid out. And if you can come in knowing your scoring, it'll really help you with your strategy on being flexible, knowing when an ADP is dropped and there's a lot of value there. That's a really strong take, and to make sure you're prepared for the scoring that your league is laid out for you.
Yeah, really great advice here on the panel. I will just say, I'll get a little buzzwordy. A lot of people say 0 RB. I'm kind of 0 tight end. What does that really mean? I'm not investing early in tight end. I never like the construct of my team. I end up with a hole at a primary receiver or running back, or I'm taking flyers on running backs that I don't like, or you start getting late rounds, and the receiver pool is very much potentially week 1, week 2 waiver wire guys. But with 0 tight end, what I'm doing is I'm prioritizing running backs and wide receivers very early, leaving myself with enough depth that if things go wrong, either in my analysis, my projections, or injuries, I'll be backed up. That includes some handcuff hedging too on different teams, but primarily, guys like Dallas Goedert. You have these Zach Ertz types, old man or inconsistent value that you'll still get a top 10, 11, 12 tight end for the week, especially in PPR formats. That's going to give your team a solid upside foundation at running back and wide receiver, which I believe the vast majority of the consistency point scoring come from. Late round QB, a lot of people go with that. I definitely subscribe. I'm generally 8th, 9th round quarterback guy. I'll take 2 in a row, but it's really important to not invest early for me in tight end, even though there are some big-time studs out there. All
right. So I think we got a be very flexible, don't draft a tight end.
That's just the way I roll.
No. And the best part about this is that we're all right. We're all wrong.
That's right.
Because we're going to go into draft and it's not going to fall our way, and that's where that flexibility comes. But then sometimes it doesn't fall your way and your team kicks butt. And you're like, man, was I brilliant in that draft. And you totally forget that it was a disaster when you came out of the draft, or you come out of a draft and you're like, oh, I'm just going to go home and dust that shelf off where that trophy's going to go. And then 4 weeks in, you're 0-4, and you're like, what just happened? But all right, so guys, we're going to go start back at RAF again. Let's talk about roster construction. Again, we're going to stay with the regular league. We'll talk some super flex here in a few minutes, but regular league, as you're drafting, do you have a certain roster? I mean, we all talked about flexibility, and that's all well and good until you draft 4 wide receivers in a row. But at what point do you have that roster construction in your head like, okay, I've got 3 receivers. I really don't need another one, so I'm going to go this direction, that direction. Talk about your strategies as you go from a roster construction standpoint in your drafts.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to sound a little similar to what I just mentioned, but my first 3 rounds are pretty rigid. I mean, we do talk flexibility here, and you should be able to kind of adapt in draft. And super flex is a different animal because some people do or don't obey that, 2 quarterbacks should be taken right off the board in the first 2 rounds, so you have to zig. But in traditional formats, I absolutely need, I double tap running back generally after I'll take a first round receiver. So I'll force myself into a first round receiver, come with 2 running backs right away, and then that 4th pick, the 4th round will be best available between wide receiver and running back. And I'm not afraid to go 2 or 3 or even 4 wide receivers in a row specifically. As long as I have 3 foundation backs, that's the primary thing I want to come out of the first 5 rounds with. I'll find more value in receiver later. Need those 3 foundation backs in the first 5 rounds.
Yeah, like coming out of, for me especially, like in these 3 wide receiver leagues, having that power wide receiver to anchor your squad is huge. And then I like to come around and have a stability at running back. Somebody that isn't going to have that variance, not like a smaller back like an HN. I'm looking for a guy that's going to come in and be stable, used to some touches. So like a Josh Jacobs, Bucky Irving. These are the type of guys that I'm looking at after I get my premium wide receiver to really anchor it. I'm looking for a high floor, maybe not one that's going to be league winning as far as like that ceiling, but someone that's going to anchor it because I'm going to get that upside with my wide receiver, and then I'm going to come around and get another wide receiver. And then at that stage, I'm looking at value. I'm looking at maybe a quarterback at this stage. If one of the top 3 guys fall to me, I might consider that in round 4. I'm usually a guy that waits later, but if I can get that top tier quarterback as well, and I've seen them fall in a lot of rounds right now. So if I could get my hands on Lamar or Jaden Daniels or Josh Allen, if they've slipped in ADP, that's where I'm going to be attacking. And I'm with him as well. I'm punting the tight end quite a bit because I see a lot of value this year. A lot of rookies. This class has been, brought up, and there's a lot of rookies that could emerge. So I'm going to take a lot of dart throws on tight end later on in the drafts. If I can get a premium quarterback, that's where I'm willing to take a stab. But always have those foundational pieces in the first 3 rounds that you can really, give that punch and then start constructing for upside afterwards.
So from a roster construction perspective, in a perfect world, I would have 2 running backs that I'm really comfortable with in the first 4 rounds in my case. But because of my belief this year, and we're talking about roster construction for this year, of the injuries that are going to happen to these runners that had so many touches last year, I'm targeting a lot of their handcuffs this year in the later rounds. So the Tyler Algiers of the world who would with Bijan, the Will Shipleys with Saquon Barkley, et cetera. I'm looking to grab those as my higher upside picks later, try and lock in those two. Very similar to the tight ends. It's amazing so far that a lot of us are passing on the tight ends this year because it's either the top three are very similar opportunities down the road, and you can almost put them in a bag and pull out a name, and it'll be very similar from an output perspective. From a quarterback perspective, if I don't grab one early, similar to a real-time RAF, I'm looking to grab two in that 8, 9, 10th round kind of thing when I don't get the top ones to give me some flexibility. And so that's how I approach things.
Yeah, I'm still not sure. I'm 100% positive I know how to roster construct. No, because when you go into it, you do go. When I first started, I went into it with the mindset, this is how I'm going to draft. And I did that for a few years. Like, didn't change anything about how I'm drafting. And then you start stopping and slowing down and actually looking at your roster and see, why am I drafting so many of one position? Or why am I drafting so many guys on the same bye week? Or why am I doing this? You start kind of figuring out what works best for you. Every draft is different. We all know that. We all know that, like, when you're up playing against a bunch of top-tier shark guys that are like, hey, I'm up here doing crazy stuff, versus, like, you're in a home league with your homies, like, they're going to go and totally make it go off the rails. And so that's the fun in fantasy football. That's the most fun for me, is, like, knowing all the different strategies and being able to pivot. So I'll go in and look and want to get a top running back that I know is going to be the workhorse guy, going to be the guy that gets the most carries. Try to get one or two of those guys early, and then I'm a big fan of getting wider, just taking, your shot, your dart throws. The tight end, when it comes to tight end, I like streaming tight end sometimes, because Grant Calcaterra, I mean, he scored a touchdown one week last year.
Never forget.
So, never forget.
Well, remind me to never be in a draft with Raph, because we have literally the exact same strategy, almost down to the T of double tapping quarterback at 8 and 9.
I pay homage.
So I'm a little bit concerned because all of us are saying the same sort of thing. I'm an eternal pessimist. Wisconsin sports has ruined me to that degree, where I have watched too many of my teams let me down time and time again.
That's cute. I'm from Cleveland. Hold my beer.
You're an eternal masochist. That's what you're describing there. So in my mind, when I'm answering how do I want my roster to be constructed, it's assuming the worst case scenario every single time. That's what I have to do. And at running back, I think this year in particular, there's a lot of worst case scenarios with running backs round 10 and later. So in my mind, I have to leave a draft at least with 3 running backs within the first 10 rounds or so. And that means I don't end up having a Jalen Warren as my running back 2. I love the Trey Bensons only if I get James Conner. I love Zach Charbonnet only if I get Kenneth Walker, because for the audience, they will get hurt if they're on my team. That's why I have to have those backups. So in my mind, I have to have a little bit more of certainty or safety at running back, and I can chase receiver a little bit later on. That's because I'm a pessimist. If you guys are happy with your life out there, don't do what I do. But that's how I have to have my roster builds.
Okay, I think I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction. I'm not an eternal pessimist, but I'm not an eternal optimist either. So, no, my preference changes from year to year based on, just like the NFL draft board changes from year. Generally speaking, they consider there's about 18 of the, you have 32 first-round draft choices, right? About 18 first-round grades, and everybody else is a second-round draft grade or later. And I kind of try to approach fantasy that's the same way. So I look at quarterback. It's the first 4 quarterbacks and everybody else. So I can wait on quarterback until the 9th or 10th round if I'm not getting one of the first 4. Tight ends, if I'm not getting one of the first 3, then I might try Evan Ingram or Travis Kelce in round 6. If they're not, that can wait. So I guess depending on the draft, I could come away with a combination of 8 receivers and running backs after 10 rounds, maybe even 9. I do not care. I'd rather be so ridiculous deep a receiver or so ridiculously deep a running back and figure it out a quarterback. No matter how well things work at tight end, it's going to go haywire at some point with maybe outside of Bowers and McBride. Kittle's going to have his ups and downs. Anyway, my point being, so I just broke it down with the quarterbacks and tight ends. With receivers, I see about 8 wide receiver 1s and about 20 receiver 2s. At running back, I see about 8 running back ones, and maybe 6 to 8 running back twos. Everybody else is an RB3 or a good handcuff or something like that. Like Joe was saying here, I want my Trey Bensons, my Will Shipleys. I'm going to target those guys aggressively after round 10.
All right, time for more shameless self-promotion. So in the back of every consistency guide, this is called the tier draft list. I created this about 5 years ago for a friend of mine because he'd never been in a draft, but he wanted to do well. So I made a one-page sheet that literally has in the corner up there, and it tells you exactly who to draft, what to draft. So round 1 is the highest ranked wide receiver 1 or running back 1 after you cross off the people on the list. That's what you're drafting. Next round, the opposite. And basically it goes through, and so by the end of round 8, you have your entire starting roster based on the consistency tiers. And at that point, you can go off the rails all you want, but you have the best floor possible. So the guys who went 6, 7 running backs or wide receivers and went all crazy on you, that's fine. Let them go nuts. You've got that core that you've got to base on, and then those guys will keep you there, and then you draft in those 7th, 8th rounds the guys that will help you with the upside. You have a very good chance of making it into the playoffs. That's what I've used forever, and that's what I'll go to my grave talking about. It just makes it easier for the person who's kind of overwhelmed by that draft. And that's what it is. I mean, you get into a online, it's 60 seconds. It's this, man. And if you're in with these groups, it's beyond normal. I can't even scratch off the pages fast enough, but that's my strategy. That's what I've used. So just wanted to share that out of the book. So, all right, so let's go down here one more time. Let's talk Superflex. We've talked about the regulars, but Superflex, I swear, every year gets bigger and bigger. And it's like if you're not in a Superflex league, like, are we even trying now? I mean, so Doug, I'll start with you. When you go into these Superflex drafts, are you I've got to have my 2 quarterbacks in the first round? Does it depend on where you're drafting in the first? What is your strategy for Superflex as you move through a draft, especially in those first probably 6 rounds where the quarterbacks, you got to have to get 2, I guess, within the first 4 to 6 rounds, but how do you handle that?
Unlike a lot of my answers, I'm going to keep this relatively short. So, no, I'm definitely not the 2 quarterbacks in the first 2 rounds kind of guy. Definitely 2 after 4. I don't play in a lot of Superflex leagues. I won't say I'm fundamentally against it, but I'm not. That's not my favorite way to play. But if I can come away with 2 quarterbacks after 3 rounds, that's generally my sweet spot. 2 after 4, depending on who the quarterbacks are, I'm okay with it. And there's quarterbacks deep enough position this year, you're probably going to find a low-end QB2 in the early to mid-4th round. So I would be okay with that. Yeah, I think that about does it.
Yeah, I'm only answering it for this year because I really do think the Superflex question changes year to year and what quarterbacks are available. Joe Burrow is, I think, the end of that first tier at quarterback 5. If you are at 6, which I've seen often in Superflex drafts, I'm just going to take Jamar Chase or Bijan Robinson or whatever else because, A, you're at 6 and you come back in the turn and be able to kind of be flexible, like I was preaching earlier, but I also don't want to push up a quarterback if I don't feel like it makes sense. So in Superflex drafts this year, it's 1 through 5 with Burrow being the end of that tier. Afterwards, and I did this on the SiriusXM host draft a couple weeks ago, I'll wait almost till the end to have my quarterback 2, whether it be Michael Penix, Cam Ward, Stafford pre-back injury. There's a number of different spots, really at quarterback, I would say 20 through 24, that if you are bold, and I think this shouldn't be what I do as the pessimist, but if you're bold, you're comfortable going without the quarterback 2. The other part, and I feel like this happens more and more, you can stream that quarterback 2. Geno Smith ended up winning. I think somebody on the panel was talking about Geno Smith, or a different one, winning people leagues last year. Baker Mayfield was not a widely drafted one. He ended up winning people a lot of leagues as well, too. I'm not pushing quarterback high unless it ends up being one of the first 4 or 5 selections. And I think being flexible, again, preaching what I'm doing here, with the Superflex spot, I think makes a lot of sense.
I mean, yeah, basically all of that. When I look at it, too, it is year-to-year kind of thing, looking at it. My quarterback 2 always ends up getting injured or whatever. It's always like a Dak Prescott kind of situation, right? And so you end up streaming that second spot. You go pick up a backup quarterback, or you go, for somebody that's injured. Cooper Rush, sometimes it gets you the points that you need, right? Whatever. But yeah, with Superflex, I try to at least get one early in the first 2 rounds or so, and then I'll wait until the middle rounds to get that second.
Historically, I've been a quarterback hog. That was a poor attempt at a hog.
I was gonna say, I thought you were choking. Like, does anybody know?
Sleeping.
That
All
was
right.
a terrible hog approach. Yeah, sorry about that. But anyway, I do have historically try to get 2 quarterbacks within the first 3 rounds, targeting 2 of the top about 16 to 17 if I can. But I won't force it. And to some of the comments earlier that are made, if it's there and I'm comfortable with the value for the position, then I'll take it. If not, I'll pass. But I typically won't go 2 rounds without having at least 1 quarterback.
Yeah, I think it's really important to come out with a quarterback in the first couple rounds. But really, for me, when I'm drafting Superflex, it really has to depend on where I am sitting in the draft. If I'm in the 1 or 2 or 3 spot, you're loving that. You're getting one of the top 3 tiered quarterbacks, whether it's a Jaden Daniels or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. Then I'm going to be a little less, urgency to have to fill up my second quarterback spot. So I might wait a little bit longer, maybe round 6 or 7, depending on how the runs are going. So we have to be watching how, quarterback runs are happening, especially in Superflex, because once it dries up fast, and you don't want to be on an end, but you want to be creating those runs. You don't want to be on the tail end of them, because that's when the value is not going to be there for you. You're going to be reaching, knowing that guy's not going to be there next round. So try and get a stud if you can, and if you can't, then I'm just going to have 2 solid guys that have really strong floors that I can go in there week after week. You could easily go into a draft and, in round 2 and 3, double tap like Baker and Purdy, and they got really great, floors, and they're going to help propel your team. But if I got a Lamar Jackson, I could wait till round 6 or 7, because I know every week I'm going to have that positional edge. So it really depends on where you're drafting. On the back end of the draft, I probably wait, because I'm going to go for probably double tap, top tier quarterback, running back, and a top tier wide receiver, so that I have the edge, because I'm not going to get the edge at quarterback, knowing that Lamar, Allen, and Hurts and Daniels are gone.
Lots of good advice. I'll keep this quick. Don't be fooled by the term Superflex. It means 2 QB league, all right? We don't draft in that format expecting that we'll start anything but a quarterback. You also should know your format. Is it 4 points per passing touchdown or 6? That will affect the valuation as well. Last but not least, I just checked the updated RotoBaller rankings. Shameless plug. 7 out of the first 12 picks are quarterbacks, so the industry's changing a little bit. You will end up in drafts where, especially home leagues, I got burned in this last season, there's not a double tap on quarterback. People will take that first pick and then wait. And so you have to be able to not, you have to kind of understand where you're headed in this draft. Bottom line, you need to draft at least 3 quarterbacks in these formats. You need redundancies. There's very thin waiver wire. No one in your league is going to want to trade you a quarterback in a Superflex league. That's of value. So make sure you have 3 coming out of the draft. That's my main advice for you guys.
All right, thank you, folks. All right, folks, we're going to open up the questions to you. Who has the first question?
So in the name of letting the draft come to you, I was in a draft just yesterday, and I committed to running back early. I ended up grabbing, I was drafting 11th. I grabbed Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs. And as the turn came around, I was like, well, maybe I should get a receiver, but I was able to grab Joe Burrow at quarterback and George Kittle at tight end. So there I am in the 5th round, and I'm like, well, I need some kind of a receiver. So I grabbed Tatoa McMillan and Zay Flowers on the back end. Was that am I in trouble at wide receiver, or given the players available, was that actually kind of, smart to just wait on receiver because of how the draft kind of fell?
I'll just hop in. It's not my preferred build, but Kittle's a receiver. I mean, the yardage he racked up last year, it's going to be fantastic in all format. You just have to make sure that you're going to account for the positions. If your league starts 3 wide receivers, maybe not super ideal, but it sounds like you did the right thing. You know, you have some upside guys there. Tetero and McMillan should be a beast. Don't be afraid to jump up on those rookie receivers if they're going to be the alpha in their offense. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, especially if you've seen what rookie wide receivers have done in the last 5 years historically, especially in the latter half of this season. Those guys are league winners. And Tet's coming out of the gate here. He's looking like a wide receiver 1 right away, and I wouldn't, put it past him to finish in the top 12 in 2025 here. So I don't think you're in horrible shape. Not probably my premium way of starting a build, but you're going to have positional advantage at, tight end. You're going to have positional advantage at your quarterback now. So, and running back, you got 2 solid floor guys there. Derrick Henry, he's a machine. He hasn't been injured. Josh Jacobs, as well, a machine, hasn't been injured, right? So these are guys that are going to give you that floor every week to allow you to, take some stabs now on some high upside wide receivers that could break out. So like your George Pickens, your Jamison Williams, these are your guys you want to be targeting now that are going to really up your bench there.
Anybody else? Doug?
Yeah, I don't want to get too complex here, but you guys are familiar with the term cross matchups in basketball, for example, right? The point guard will sometimes guard the shooting guard, or the power forward will guard the center, or something like that. I try to look fantasy football that way. You said you went with Kittle in the third or fourth round, right? Third round. Like Raph said, Kittle is essentially your wide receiver 1. If you can, now he may not perform to that level, but I know personally I'm pretty high on McMillan. I have him as my wide receiver 15. So he's your wide receiver 2. If he plays at that level, doing that cross matchup thing, now you need your wide receiver 3 to basically outperform another guy's tight end 1 to get that micro edge. So it's not my preferred build either, but if so much of fantasy, it sounds we play a simple game and sometimes we make it complex, but if you just pick the right guys, any strategy works.
I'm comfortable doing that with one or the other, quarterback or tight end. To do both, it makes it a bit more challenging. When you have depth like Tet McMillan and Zay Flowers coming back, it's one thing, and it feels like you're reading the room with that one, but typically you would want one or the other, and I think in this instance, the way I feel about the quarterback position, I would assume 4 point per passing touchdown. That's where I'll end up fading Joe Burrow a little bit more, because I do think George Kittle has the positional advantage over a lot of other tight ends. I'm going to pull a bit here, Bob. I'm going to do the meme here. I'm the captain now. I'm going to ask a question here, or as my mother-in-law would say, the Mimi. I don't know why she does. Love you, Tina. Everyone here on the panel wants to fade tight end, myself included. So who are our late-round tight ends that we're targeting? Because I'm fascinated by this question from this group.
Tucker Kraft. He's my tight end 5 headed in this year. And you can get him pretty late in drafts right now. I got him, I think, yesterday in round 12. He's got that yak ability, that upside. And what we're looking for in the tight end position is somebody that can be the number 1 target in that offense. So without a clear alpha, really, in Green Bay, we're looking at a tight end that has the potential to be the number 1 target in that offense. And when you bring in, that open field, how elusive he is, he's been compared to a guy like George Kittle with his yak ability. He's a guy that I'm taking, and I'm okay pairing him up later on with a guy like Dallas Goedert or someone like that who has that potential, and then all of a sudden you have maybe a top 5 tight end every single week in your lineup.
All right, so I'm going to talk about a guy that yesterday in the Kings Classic was drafted in the 7th round of a 14-team draft, in the 6th round of a 14-team draft. You know who that late round guy is? Travis Kelce. Are you kidding me? This guy had 1 down year, still plays in the top 12 in points. All right, his consistency was the worst ever. I get it. But he comes back and just be 80% of the guy he was a couple years ago. That's a hell of a spot. So I'm planting that flag.
Well, I'll cheat a little bit and answer my own question when I pose, but
Fair.
I agree with the Tucker Krafts and Travis Kelce's. The one claim to fame I've probably had was getting rookie year Sam Laporta as my starting tight end, which was kind of ballsy to do, right? I'm not saying that Mason Taylor will do that, But who else is catching passes for New York? In the year 2025, there has to be other people besides Garrett Wilson running an efficient offense, or we're going to have like a 1960s version of the Jets, which I don't think will happen. I don't think there's anybody else besides Mason Taylor. He had the first-round draft pedigree. There was a lot of rumors about the Eagles trading up into the first round and making that the Dallas Goedert heir apparent. I really think Mason Taylor, if we're saying one of these guys past tight end 17, could be one that will be in your starting lineup week in and week out. It's not the Sam Laporta rookie year necessarily, but I think Mason Taylor's my answer.
The Jets won the Super Bowl in '69. Just saying.
Well, and here's the deal too with that. I'm about him, but I am about Mason Taylor. Like, I'm drafting him because you get him late. Yeah, baby, give me that. But how many times have we been burned by Jets tight ends? So
I'm a Jets
I
fan
know it's
my
in the
whole
back
life.
of your head, and I know it can be scary to draft some of these guys that have burned you before. But I promise you, there's a lot of scary stuff. I don't know if that's the scariest thing.
That's cute, Raph. I'm a Browns fan. Let's.
All right. So
Share my pain.
typically when I'm looking for tight ends, I'm looking for someone like a Mason Taylor who can be the second option for that team's offense. But I'm planting a flag, using Bob's term, on Colston Loveland. I just have with Ben Johnson, the way he used Laporta, he purposely targeted him, picked him as a top 10 wide receiver, top 10 tight end. So I'm planting my flag on Loveland as the one that I'm going for late and thinking he can have close to a Laporta season in year one.
I'll throw another one out. Dalton Kincaid. Talk about a guy that's the one or two on his team. I mean, we've got Shakir hurt now. Coleman, not bad. There's nothing else. So Dalton Kincaid 2 years ago was actually very good. Had a really down year last year. Could be right back to where he was a couple years ago and going to what, rounds 12, 13, 14? Very late. So, Doug?
I'm down with Loveland. I'll give you a two for here. I know this isn't a late round guy, but I gotta profess my love for Evan Ingram this year. Yes. So he will play that Joker role, and even if it's not the traditional Joker role that we've come to expect from Jimmy Graham, Reggie Bush, Darren Sproles, and the Joker is not just a tight end exclusive thing. It's a position that creates mismatches. My late round guy outside of Colston Loveland would be Hunter Henry. And why? Okay, yeah, 2 touchdowns last year. In one of the worst offensive environments possible last year, 66 catches, 2 touchdowns. What do we think is going to happen this year? You think we're going to get another 2 touchdowns this year? Better offense, better offensive line, better supporting cast. He's probably going to be the top option in the red zone. Even if it's 5 touchdowns, I don't see that catch number dropping. I don't see his yardage number dropping. We get 66, 70 catches, 5 touchdowns from a tight end. That's a tight end 1.
Hey, guys. So I know what we're doing about Addison. He's got 3 games suspended, right? But for the Dogs, Mixon, Godwin, Judkins, where are you guys comfortable taking them?
Mixon,
I just took Mixon 10 seconds ago in the 6th round, end of it.
I'll do this real quick.
Go ahead.
I'm holding out some hope for Godwin. The other 2 are completely off. I think I have Mixon at 190 on my board, and Judkins I think I have probably 140. We'll be lucky. I think we'll be lucky if we get 6 games from Judkins this year. And Dr. Jesse Morris was up here right before we were, and he thinks that they're probably going to announce season-ending injury at some point with Mixon. Yeah. What's that? So get Chubb. I would not be totally surprised if Woody Marks ends up being, because we're not so sure about Chubb having that explosion anymore, and who can blame him? He had 2 devastating knee injuries, so I think Chubb will go before Marks, but I think Marks might end up being that guy toward the end of the year.
Yeah, I wouldn't be trying to get any of those guys. Maybe Godwin, like as a dart throw, but I wouldn't be paying ADP for him right now. With all the guys that they have going around there, even though you could put him in your IR spot, I'm not going anywhere near Chubb, Judkins either. Woody Marks, I like him a lot.
I'll jump in because I have drafted Judkins a few shares, few too many probably, and certainly dynasty-wise. Again, pessimist. I have a lot of Judkins pre-everything legal from a dynasty perspective. Not as great now. I would defer to Drew Davenport, who does a fantastic job from a legal perspective. He is here, I think, either on site or walking around now. Drew is awesome. Follow on Twitter, does a lot of the legal stuff too. We talked a little bit off air, but It's possible that something much like the Alvin Kamara situation from 2 years ago happens where there will be a legal ramification, but it plays out the following year. In that case, with Judkins being a complete drop in the ADP, let's just say 12 and later, I'm already expecting the worst case scenario. That can be my first cut. But what's in comparison to, I don't know, Romeo Dobbs, who I like a lot this year, there's one of those players that can actually pop off, and it's a Judkins sort if the things work out legality-wise.
All right, we got time for one more.
All right, so I'll admit it, I'm a best ballaholic. So now I have to shift my mindset to redraft.
Better in best ball.
And what I've noticed is that I feel instinctively, as the many drafts I've done for best ball, that I can find value at running back later, and the receivers are going quickly. My big money leagues are FFPC, so it's the 2 wide receivers, 2 flex. And I just feel like I can pick a Kyle Monange, I can pick a Jaden Blue, I can find those values later. So I've been anchoring a lot with Jonathan Taylor in like the second round, or Josh Jacobs, and hammering wide receiver and just throwing darts. Do you agree? I just find that there's nothing left at wide receiver. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Thoughts? Thank you.
I just want to hop in for a second. I think it's a great strategy. I don't go with the 0 RB, but when you're looking at taking dart throws, there are so many satellite backs and such an off-injured position like running back, you're going to have a lot of opportunity. It'll cost you fab off the wire, too, if it's after the fact, not in best ball formats, but in redraft leagues. But ultimately, and you know this from best ball, you'll need redundancies. I'm not as into the in-team handcuff as I am into the handcuff hedge, meaning we'll take other players who are secondary backs from other teams who may not have as clear of a situation or committee situations, give them an opportunity in those same ADP ranges. So if the primary running back doesn't get injured, you'll never have the ideal handcuff from the same team get a shot. Whereas the handcuff hedge, you're spreading your money across the board a little bit throughout the league. You have more of an opportunity to get that dart throw to hit a target. So I like the strategy.
I think you've done a really good job. You know, you're understanding where the value's falling, and if it's the value's falling to you at wide receiver and you're seeing it like dry up, then you're hammering it, right? And that's where you like trust your instincts too. You know, like you see it. You know, you've been playing a while now, it seems, and yeah, just trust your instincts, and I think you've done it well. You know, yeah, hit those ADPs and keep doing the values.
The only thing I'll add, great points, guys. The only thing I'll add is there's anywhere from probably, I don't know, I don't do studies on this, but there's anywhere from probably 5 to 10 contingent upside running backs every year. You're going to be able to find those. I'm a big fan of Kyle Monange as well in that offense. I'm a big fan of his in general, but especially with what he could do for Ben Johnson. There's not maybe 1 or 2 contingent upside receivers, and that's on a loaded depth chart. So I think you're right. You have better spike week potential with going those elite receivers as long as possible, and then the secondary receivers, and then if you can get a startable running back and then a bunch of, like you said, in the FFPC, if you can just get a bunch of contingent upside guys, the Shipleys, the Manon guys, I think you're right on track.
Some ambiguous backfields too, where we don't really know the starter yet. Like, keep your eye on Jacksonville. I know my buddy Dan Mater, he pointed that out in our first panel. You know, that backfield, whoever comes out of it is probably going to be a league winner because of, you know, who's getting those shares in those positions, because, you know, their ADP right now, I think running back 37 is where I think Etienne's going right now. And when a running back goes into a starting job, they're getting, you know, almost a lion's share at that stage, whereas a wide receiver that's going in is usually just going up and bumping up that next one up the depth chart. So they're not going to get the targets that, say, if Jamar Chase is injured, well, those primary are going to go to T. Higgins, and, you know, Burton's going to come in and gain something. He's going to get some value. But say Bucky goes down, Rashad White now gets the lion's share of that backfield, and now he's becoming a league winner for you, and now you're not worried about your RB2. So stack your bottom with all those running backs that have that opportunity to take on. Then you'll be solid. And I like your call with Jonathan Taylor there, your anchor, and then you're going to win at wide receiver.
All right. All right. Well, thank you guys very much. Give them a big round of applause.